And joining us now from the United States with more on Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit and ahead of his meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump is former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you. Good morning here. Good afternoon there.
So both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have emphasized that Netanyahu will be the very first leader to visit Washington since Trump took office. What is the significance of this?
Well, it's significant, I think, for Israel, probably less for the United States. It's interesting. The news here is all about tariff wars, still about the tragic plane crash in the Potomac, about the Emmy Awards. There's only one major newspaper. There was a small item about the meeting. It's amazing. It hasn't made major headlines here. But for Israel, it's of immense significance. Everything, all these fateful decisions that are on this table. The second phase of the ceasefire in Gaza, which will determine whether all the hostages will be released, whether Hamas basically will continue to rule Gaza, the situation in Lebanon, the ceasefire, and how that is to play out, the relationship with the new Syrian regime. I can go on. The peace treaty between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which was supposed to have been concluded before October 7, 2023, remains very much an issue to be discussed. The future of the Palestinian issue, which is very much related to the Saudi-Israel peace, because the Saudis want to see progress on that phase. And beyond all, the U.S.-Israel position, if it can be called such, vis-a-vis Iran and the Iranian nuclear program.
So as you said, there's a lot on the agenda. Of course, Iran, the hostages deal, Saudi normalization. I want to break down these main issues on the agenda. And I think it's fitting perhaps to start with Iran, the head of the snake or head of the octopus. So what is Netanyahu's aim? What does he hope to walk out of this meeting with regards to Iran?
Well, ideally, it's a goal that we have sought now for well over 15 years, which is a U.S.-Israel coordinated position about reimposing, punishing sanctions on Iran. But the ultimate goal would be to eliminate the Iranian nuclear program, either by economic and punitive means or by kinetic means, by military means. And that could take different forms, a U.S.-Israel coordinated operation, or an Israeli operation that has full American backing. That keeping in mind that Israel, for all of its great military prowess, particularly in the air, as we've just demonstrated by attacking our Air Force, attacking Iran now twice, attacking the Houthis twice, have the ability to strike Iran, but not with the firepower that the United States. Israel does not have strategic bombers, B-52s, B-1s, B-2s. So that would be certainly Netanyahu's goal. More than his goal, it's sort of his life's mission, is to save Israel from the Iranian threat.
And, on the hostage negotiations, we know that talks for phase 2 begin today. Netanyahu is set to meet later today with Steve Witkoff. Netanyahu and the Israeli security establishment seem to be very adamant that Israel must return to the war to eliminate Hamas. However, the U.S. is hoping to see the deal through to the end, which would include a permanent end to the war. Do you think this will be a point of contention during the meeting with Witkoff and with Trump?
I think that the deal, the phase deal, is signed by the President of the United States. He has put his imprimatur on that deal. And as a person who is transactional, who likes deals, I don't think he's want to see his deal interrupted. And it is unclear right now what would precipitate the failure, let me get this straight, the failure of a second phase, because if Hamas is abiding by the terms of the first phase, on what grounds then do you not enter the second phase? It's a very difficult case for Israel to make if Hamas is not violating that deal in a very demonstrative way. Very difficult. And for Israeli society, keep in mind, Israeli society, I think today, overwhelmingly, if you look at the polls, supports continued release of hostages, particularly after the deeply emotional images of the reunion of those first hostages released in the first tranche. How do you deny the families that are waiting for their loved ones to come home that same deeply emotional reunion, as you see in these pictures you're seeing there? How do you deny them? Yeah. So it'd be very, very difficult. I think that the issue I think really would have to do is how will the United States, leading an international effort, particularly an inter-Arab effort, assure that Hamas can no longer take over control of of the Gaza Strip, which now has become Israel's national goal. You don't hear about total victory anymore, but you do hear about preventing Hamas from regaining control over the Gaza Strip.
Yeah. And now I want to transition also to Saudi normalization. This is clearly at the forefront of President Trump's mind and his agenda for the Middle East. You know, what demands might he make of Netanyahu during this meeting to achieve these goals? And does Netanyahu have any red lines that he can perhaps say no to?
Well, I think there's probably two demands. One would be some type of Palestinian Authority involvement in the post-war administration of Gaza. The second would be what the Saudis have called a pathway to Palestinian statehood. The Saudis are very adamant about this, very precise. They don't say that Israel has to discuss the creation of a Palestinian state. They say that Israel has to discuss a pathway to the creation of a Palestinian state. Now, if you ask me, a pathway is a thing with gravel. It's not very significant. The Saudis are not, of course, a democratic government, but they do have public opinion, and they have to assuage that public opinion by showing that in return for making peace with Israel, they're doing something on the Palestinian issue. I think that Netanyahu, and I'm going out on a limb here, would agree to discuss a pathway. He may even agree to some symbolic Palestinian Authority presence in Gaza on the day after, but his government won't, and he'll have a hard time. Not only with the Smotrich wing of his government, perhaps with elements with his own Likud party. And that's going to be different. What he can do is come back to his government and say, well, what can I do? The president forced my hand. And our relationship with this president is actually crucial to our national security. So let's give in on this point. He could do that. I will not be surprised if those demands are, at least certainly the pathway demand, is not made of the prime minister.
All right, well, Ambassador Michael Oren, thank you so much for your analysis today. It's certainly going to be an interesting couple of days in Washington. Thank you so much.
Indeed. Good day. Bye-bye.